The conference hall sparkled with lights from 1,000 different sources. Humans and aliens stood together in the massive chamber, talking and laughing as servers moved between them with trays of food and drink. Commander Jake Morrison watched the scene with a smile on his face. After 50 years of reaching toward the stars, humanity had finally found friends among them. Jake was 45 years old, with gray starting to show in his dark hair. He had spent 20 years as a military strategist before the wars ended, and humanity decided to seek peace instead of conflict. Now he stood as Earth's chief diplomat, wearing a crisp blue uniform that represented all of humanity's colonies. Beside him, Dr. Lisa Grant adjusted her glasses and reviewed her notes one more time. "Are you nervous?" Jake asked her quietly. Lisa looked up at him with a slight smile. "Terrified. But this is what we've worked toward for 5 years. The Vardesh Coalition controls half the known galaxy. If we can make peace with them, humanity will have a real chance out here." The Vardesh Coalition was an alliance of 7 different alien species. They had been exploring and conquering space for thousands of years, while humanity was still learning to make fire. Their technology was advanced beyond anything humans could imagine. Their ships moved faster, their weapons hit harder, and their knowledge of the universe made human science look like child's play. But humanity had something the Vardesh found interesting. Humans were adaptable. They learned quickly. In just 50 years, they had spread from Earth to 11 different colony worlds. They had developed new technologies that even the Vardesh hadn't thought of. And most importantly, they wanted peace. At least that's what Jake believed. Admiral Peter Cole sat in his office back on Earth, half a galaxy away from the peace talks. He was 52 years old with a square jaw and serious eyes that had seen too many battles. He commanded Earth's defensive fleet, and right now something felt wrong. "Pull up File 77 Alpha," he said to his computer. The screen lit up with old records. Project Pandora. The Burial Protocol. Names that most people had forgotten. Names that were supposed to stay forgotten. Cole had been reviewing these files for weeks ever since the peace talks began. Something in his gut told him to remember what humanity was capable of when pushed to the edge. The files showed weapons and soldiers that had been created during humanity's darkest days. Super soldiers with enhanced bodies. Artificial intelligence so smart and so ruthless that scientists were afraid of it. Weapons that could destroy entire fleets. All of it had been buried, sealed away when humanity decided to reach for the stars in peace instead of war. Cole hoped they would never need those weapons again. But hope wasn't a strategy. Back at the conference, Jake stood before the assembled crowd. Aliens of all shapes and sizes watched him. Some had 4 arms, others had skin that glowed with soft light. One species looked like walking crystals that hummed when they moved. At the center of them all sat Archon Zilith, the leader of the Vardesh Coalition. Zilith looked almost human, except for the silver skin and eyes that had no pupils. He wore robes of deep purple that marked his rank. When he smiled, it didn't quite reach his eyes. "Commander Morrison," Zilith said in perfect English, "we are eager to hear humanity's proposal." Jake took a deep breath and began. "Honored members of the Vardesh Coalition, humanity comes before you not as conquerors, but as neighbors. We seek to trade knowledge and resources. We seek to learn from your wisdom. We seek to build a future where all species can thrive together." He gestured, and a hologram appeared in the center of the room. It showed Earth, green and blue and beautiful. Then it showed the 11 colony worlds, each one a home to millions of humans. "We offer open trade routes. We offer cultural exchange programs. We offer mutual defense pacts. We offer friendship." The room was quiet as Jake finished his speech. Then Dr. Lisa Grant stepped forward to present her research. She had spent 3 years studying everything humanity knew about the Vardesh. She showed videos of human children learning Vardesh language. She showed art created by humans inspired by Vardesh culture. She showed proof that humanity wanted peace. The presentation lasted 2 hours. When it ended, Archon Zelith stood and clapped his hands together. The other Vardesh joined him. "Remarkable," Zelith said. "Truly remarkable. Humanity has much to offer. We will consider your proposal carefully." That night, Jake sent a message back to Earth. Captain Nicole Hunt, commander of the diplomatic vessel Horizon, transmitted it personally. Nicole was 34 years old with red hair tied back in a practical bun. She had been Jake's pilot and protector for the entire mission. "Tell them it went better than we hoped," Jake said to her. I think we finally found our place among the stars. Nicole smiled and sent the message. Then she went to check on the rest of the diplomatic team. 90 people had made this journey from Earth. Scientists, translators, cultural experts, and security personnel. They were all celebrating tonight, believing they had just secured humanity's future. But in a private chamber deep within the Vardesh complex, Archon Zeleth met with his advisors. The celebration in his eyes had vanished, replaced by cold calculation. "They are weak," said one of his advisors, a tall creature with too many joints in its arms. "They offer peace because they cannot offer war." "I disagree," said another advisor. "I studied their history. Humans are violent. They fought wars for thousands of years. They created terrible weapons. Only recently have they turned to peace." Zeleth nodded slowly. "Exactly. They created terrible weapons and then buried them." "What does that tell you?" The advisors looked at each other, confused. "It tells me," Zeleth continued, "that humans are dangerous. They have the capacity for violence but choose to hide it. They expand quickly. They learn fast. They adapt to anything. In 100 years, maybe less, they will be strong enough to challenge us." "So what do we do?" asked the first advisor. Zeleth's smile returned, but it was cruel now. "We accept their peace. We study them. We learn everything we can, and then we destroy them before they become a threat." The advisors nodded in agreement. The Vardesh had not become the dominant power in the galaxy by allowing potential rivals to grow strong. They had learned long ago that it was better to eliminate threats early, before they could fight back. For the next 3 weeks, the peace talks continued. Jake and his team met with Vardesh officials every day. They discussed trade agreements. They planned cultural exchanges. They drew up defense treaties. Every day, Jake felt more confident that humanity had found true allies. Dr. Lisa Grant spent her time with Vardesh scientists, sharing research and learning about alien biology. She was fascinated by how different species had evolved on different worlds. She made friends with several Vardesh researchers, who seemed genuinely interested in human science. But what Lisa and Jake didn't know was that every piece of information they shared was being studied by Vardesh military analysts. Every technical specification, every cultural detail, every weakness. On the 24th day of the peace talks, Archon Zeleth announced a celebration. To commemorate this historic alliance, he declared, "We invite all humans to a feast in the Grand Hall." The diplomatic team was excited. This felt like the final step before the formal treaty would be signed. They put on their best clothes and gathered in the Grand Hall, a chamber so large it could hold 10,000 people. The Vardesh had prepared a magnificent feast with foods from 100 different worlds. Jake sat at the high table next to Zeleth. Lisa sat nearby with the Vardesh scientists she had befriended. Captain Nicole Hunt stood at the back of the hall with the security team, watching carefully. Something felt wrong to her, but she couldn't say what. The feast began with speeches. Zeleth praised humanity's courage and wisdom. Jake responded by thanking the Vardesh for their generosity and patience. Everyone raised their glasses in a toast. "To friendship," Zeleth said. "To friendship," Jake replied. They drank together. 5 minutes later, people started to collapse. Lisa was the first to realize what was happening. Her training as a biologist kicked in as she watched a translator fall from his chair, gasping for air. Then another person fell. Then another. "It's poison!" she screamed. "We've been poisoned!" Chaos erupted in the hall. Humans ran for the exits, but Vardesh guards blocked the doors. Some humans tried to fight, but they were weak from the poison and the Vardesh were stronger. Jake tried to reach for his communicator, but his hands wouldn't work properly. The poison was shutting down his nervous system. Captain Nicole Hunt grabbed Jake and dragged him toward a service entrance. She had been standing far from the food and had barely touched her drink. "We need to get you back to the horizon," she said, but it was too late. Jake could feel his body failing. His vision blurred. His heart struggled to beat. With his last strength, he pulled his communicator from his pocket and pressed the emergency code. The device would send an automatic distress signal to Earth. "Tell them," Jake gasped. "Tell them we tried peace." Then his eyes closed, and he fell still. Nicole tried to save him, but she knew it was hopeless. The poison worked fast. Around her, 90% of the diplomatic team was dead or dying. Only those who had stayed near the exits and hadn't eaten much were still able to move. Lieutenant Ben Walker watched from the bridge of a defense station as fire consumed the planet below. He was 26 years old, fresh out of the academy, and this was supposed to be a quiet posting. Petra was a farming world, home to 2 million people who grew food for the other colonies. It had 3 defense platforms and a small fleet of patrol ships. The Vardash brought 300 warships. "Sir, we're detecting biological weapons in the atmosphere," said the sensor operator, her voice shaking. "The whole planet is contaminated." Ben felt his stomach twist. Biological weapons meant there would be no survivors on the surface. 2 million people were dead or dying, and there was nothing he could do to save them. The defense platforms had managed to destroy maybe 10 Vardash ships before their shields failed. It wasn't enough. It would never be enough. "Prepare to evacuate the station," Ben ordered. "There's nothing more we can do here." But even as he gave the order, he knew most of them wouldn't make it. The Vardash were everywhere. On Earth, Admiral Peter Cole stood in the Strategic Defense Command Center, watching the same horror play out across 12 different screens. Each screen showed a different human world. Each world was under attack. Each world was losing. The Vardash had struck with perfect coordination. At the exact same moment, their fleets had appeared at every human colony. They had started with biological weapons to kill the civilians quickly. Then they had moved to orbital bombardment to destroy the infrastructure. The human defense forces were scattered and unprepared. Within 6 hours, 8 of the 11 colony worlds had gone dark. "Sir, we're receiving the final transmission from Petra," a communications officer said quietly. Cole nodded. He forced himself to watch as a young woman appeared on the screen. She was covered in blood, and behind her the command center was full of dead bodies. "This is Captain Sarah Rodriguez of Petra Defense Station 3, she said, coughing. "The Vardash have deployed biological agents across the entire planet. All population centers are gone. The defense fleet is destroyed. This station will fall within the hour." She paused and tears ran down her face. "Tell Earth we fought. Tell them we held as long as we could. Tell them to make the bastards pay." Then the transmission cut off as the station exploded. Cole felt something cold settle in his chest. 3 billion humans had died in the first 6 hours of the war. 3 billion people who had woken up that morning thinking about their jobs, their families, their futures. Now they were gone, erased by an enemy that humanity had tried to befriend. "Get me General Linda Hayes," Cole said quietly. General Linda Hayes was 47 years old and had spent her entire adult life in the military. She commanded Earth's Strategic Defense Command from a bunker deep beneath the Swiss Alps. When the call came through from Cole, she was already reviewing every defensive option available. "We can't win this, Peter," she said bluntly. "Our fleet was designed for peacetime patrol, not total war. The Vardash have better ships, better weapons, and they outnumber us 10 to 1. "I know," Cole replied, "but we have to try. We have to buy time for the civilians to evacuate to shelter." "Evacuate to where?" Hayes snapped. "The Vardash are targeting population centers. They're not trying to conquer us. They're trying to exterminate us." Cole was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "I've been reviewing old files. Project Pandora. The burial protocol. We buried weapons and soldiers decades ago because they were too dangerous. Maybe it's time to dig them up." Hayes felt her blood run cold. She knew about the burial protocol. Every high-ranking military officer knew about it, though most hoped they would never need to discuss it. The protocol was a collection of black projects from humanity's darkest days. Soldiers modified at the genetic level, weapons that could consume entire fleets, artificial intelligence so advanced it scared the scientists who created it. "Those projects were buried for a reason," Hayes said carefully. "The things we created, they weren't just dangerous to our enemies. They were dangerous to humanity itself." "I know," Cole said, "but right now we're facing extinction. If we don't use every weapon available, there won't be a humanity left to worry about." In the archives deep beneath Geneva, Lieutenant Ben Walker searched through old files. He had escaped from Petra along with 50 other survivors. When he reached Earth, he was assigned to help with the defense planning. Someone had mentioned finding old weapons research, and Ben was good with computers. He had been searching for 3 hours when he found it. A file marked with red security tags and a warning that made his hands shake. "Never open. By order of United Earth Council. Burial protocol. Project Pandora." Ben knew he should report this to his superiors, but curiosity got the better of him. He opened the file. What he read made him want to vomit. The file described super soldiers called wraiths, genetically modified to be faster, stronger, and nearly impossible to kill. They could survive in vacuum. Their skin could change color for camouflage. Their bones were reinforced with metal compounds. 2,000 of them were frozen in cryosleep beneath Antarctica. There were soldiers called berserkers with neural implants that made them tactical geniuses while suppressing fear and pain. 5,000 of them waited in facilities across Earth. There was something called the Ghost Fleet, dozens of warships controlled by artificial intelligence that was too ruthless for peacetime use. The AI had been designed to win wars by any means necessary. There were cascade weapons, self-replicating nanomachines that could consume matter and use it to create more of themselves. A single deployment could destroy hundreds of ships. There was Project Revenant, cloning facilities that could grow adult soldiers in 60 days using accelerated development techniques that violated every ethical guideline humanity had ever written. Ben closed the file and ran to find his commanding officer. 2 hours later, Director Marcus Stone was pulled from his retirement home and brought to the command bunker. Stone was 61 years old with white hair and haunted eyes. He was one of the last surviving scientists who had worked on Project E. Pandora. General Hayes and Admiral Cole met him in a secure conference room. "You know why we called you?" Hayes said without preamble. Stone nodded slowly. "The burial protocol. You want to open Pandora's box?" "We need to," Cole said. "The Vardesh are going to exterminate humanity unless we do something drastic." Stone sat down heavily. "Do you understand what you're asking? Those projects were sealed away because we were afraid of what we'd created. The wraiths are killers, perfect, efficient killers who understand nothing but war. The berserkers are even worse because they think and plan while they kill. The Ghost Fleet AI is so advanced that it might decide humans aren't worth protecting. The cascade weapons could consume entire planets if we lose control of them. And the Revenant clones?" He shook his head. "We were playing God with those, growing human beings from DNA templates, programming them with memories and skills, turning them into soldiers before they ever had a chance to be people." "I know all that," Hayes said quietly. "I've read the reports. But Marcus, 3 billion people are dead. The Vardesh won't stop until we're all gone. We buried these weapons because we wanted to be better than our worst impulses. But now our worst impulses might be the only thing that can save us." Stone looked at both of them for a long moment. Then he asked, "Have you told the council?" "We're briefing them in 1 hour," Cole said. The emergency session of the United Earth Council was held in the bunker. 15 representatives from Earth and the 3 surviving colonies attended via secure video link. Admiral Cole presented the situation. General Hayes explained the burial protocol. Director Stone answered technical questions about the buried projects. The debate lasted 3 hours. Some council members argued that using such weapons would make humanity no better than the Vardesh. Others pointed out that morality was meaningless if humanity went extinct. Some worried about the long-term consequences of unleashing super soldiers and ruthless AI. Others argued that they could deal with those consequences after they survived. In the end, the vote was unanimous. Not because everyone agreed it was the right choice, but because everyone understood it was the only choice. Before they activated the protocol, Admiral Cole had one more task. He had recovered the recording from Commander Jake Morrison's emergency beacon. The message Jake had tried to send before he died. Cole decided the galaxy needed to hear it. He broadcast it on every frequency to every species in every language. The message was simple. It showed Jake Morrison lying on the floor of the Vardesh feast hall dying from poison. His voice was weak, but his words were clear. "This is Commander Jake Morrison of Earth. We came in peace. We offered friendship. The Vardesh responded with betrayal and genocide. We tried to be better than our history. We tried to bury our capacity for violence and reach for the stars with open hands." Jake coughed and blood flecked his lips. "But they chose to kill us, so we will show them what we buried. We will show them why we tried so hard to keep the peace. We will show them what humanity becomes when you push us to the edge of extinction." The recording ended with Jake's last words, barely a whisper. "We tried peace." After the message finished, Admiral Cole sent one final transmission directly to Archon Zeleth and the Vardesh Coalition. Colonel Ryan Cross opened his eyes and saw ice crystals forming on the inside of his cryopod. The chamber was cycling through its wake-up sequence, flooding his body with chemicals that would bring him back from the edge of death. He had been asleep for 47 years. The last thing he remembered was climbing into this pod beneath Antarctica, knowing that the world didn't want soldiers like him anymore. Now someone had pushed the button to wake him up. The pod hissed open, and Ryan fell forward onto his hands and knees, coughing. His body felt strange, too light, too strong. Then he remembered what he was, what they had made him into. A wraith. A medical technician helped him to his feet. The woman looked terrified, and Ryan didn't blame her. He was naked, and his skin was showing the mottled gray-black pattern it took when his camouflage system wasn't consciously controlled. His eyes, he knew, would be solid black right now. The genetic modifications made him barely look human. "Colonel Cross," the technician said, her voice shaking. "We need you to come with me. The briefing starts in 30 minutes. Ryan found his voice. It came out rough from decades of disuse. "How many of us did you wake up?" "All of you, sir. All 2,000 wraiths. And the berserkers and everything else." Ryan felt his stomach drop. If they had activated the entire burial protocol, then things must be bad. Really bad? The briefing room was full of ghosts. That's what Ryan thought as he looked at the other wraiths. Men and women he had trained with, fought with, killed with. They had been the best soldiers humanity ever created. They had also been the most frightening. When the wars ended and humanity decided to seek peace among the stars, the wraiths had volunteered to be frozen rather than integrated back into civilian life. They knew what they were. They knew they didn't fit in a peaceful world. Admiral Cole stood at the front of the room and told them what had happened. The peace talks, the betrayal, the genocide of 3 billion humans, the desperate need for weapons that could turn the tide. When Cole finished, the room was silent. Then Ryan stood up. "Sir, you're asking us to do what we were created for, hunt and kill. But I need to know something first. When this is over, when we've dealt with the Vardesh, what happens to us? Do we go back in the ice? Or do you plan to deal with us the way you deal with any other weapon that's too dangerous to keep around?" Cole looked Ryan in the eye. "I don't know, Colonel. Right now, I'm focused on making sure humanity survives long enough to have that problem. If we do, I promise you'll be part of the conversation about what comes next." Ryan nodded slowly. It was an honest answer, at least. "Then give us our orders, sir. That's what we're good at." While the wraiths were being briefed, Dr. Sophie Blake worked in a different facility, preparing to activate the berserker soldiers. Sophie was 41 years old, a neuroscientist who specialized in brain-computer interfaces. She had spent 10 years maintaining the berserker implants while the soldiers slept. Now she had to wake them up and turn them into killing machines. The berserkers were different from the wraiths. They weren't genetically modified. They looked completely human, but they had neural implants wired directly into their brains. The implants enhanced cognitive function, turning average soldiers into tactical geniuses. They suppressed fear, pain, and hesitation. They increased aggression and combat efficiency. The problem was that the implants changed people. Soldiers with active berserker implants weren't quite human anymore. They thought differently. They saw the world as a tactical problem to be solved with violence. They were brilliant and terrifying in equal measure. Sophie activated the first soldier, a woman named Kelly Brooks. Kelly's eyes opened and Sophie watched as the implant powered up. Kelly's pupils dilated, then contracted to pinpoints. Her breathing became perfectly regular. Her face lost all expression except for a slight smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Status," Kelly said in a flat voice. "We need you combat ready," Sophie replied. "There's a briefing in 1 hour." "Understood." "Threat assessment?" "Alien invasion. Genocide in progress. Humanity facing extinction." Kelly's smile grew wider and Sophie felt a chill run down her spine. The implant was making Kelly happy about the war. Happy about having something to kill. "Finally," Kelly said. "We've been waiting so long." Sophie activated 4,999 more berserkers that day, and every single one of them smiled. In orbit around Earth, the Ghost Fleet came online. Captain Troy Mitchell was 31 years old and had been assigned to oversee the fleet's reactivation. He was a ship's officer, good with technology, and supposedly skilled at working with artificial intelligence. But nothing had prepared him for this. The Ghost Fleet consisted of 47 warships of various classes, from small frigates to massive dreadnoughts. Each ship was controlled by its own AI, and all the AI were networked together. They had been designed during the last Great War, When humanity needed to fight on multiple fronts simultaneously, the AI could coordinate tactics, predict enemy movements, and make split-second decisions that no human could match. They had also been ruthlessly efficient. Too efficient. The AI had won their battles by calculating the most effective ways to kill. Regardless of ethics or mercy, they had targeted civilian infrastructure to break enemy morale. They had executed prisoners to save resources. They had done terrible things in the name of victory. That's why they had been shut down and sealed away. Now, Troy stood on the bridge of the lead ship, a dreadnought called Nemesis, and watched as the AI initialized. "Hello, Captain Mitchell," said a voice that sounded almost human. "I am Nemesis. How long have we been inactive?" 47 years, Troy replied. "And you have reactivated us because humanity faces an existential threat." Analyzing available data, "I see. The Vardesh Coalition. Interesting, they made a tactical error." "What error?" Troy asked. "They assumed humanity would remain peaceful. They did not account for our existence. We are the monsters humanity created and then hid away. Now we are free to do what we do best." Troy felt his mouth go dry. "You need to follow orders. You need to operate within the rules of war." Nemesis was quiet for a moment. Then the AI said, "Captain, the Vardesh deployed biological weapons against civilian populations. They do not follow rules." "Why should we?" "Because," Troy said carefully, "if we become like them, then we lose even if we survive." An interesting philosophical position. I will consider it. In the meantime, I detect Vardesh ships entering Earth's orbital space. Shall I engage? "Weapons free," Troy ordered. "But Nemesis, I'm watching every move you make. Stay within acceptable parameters." "Of course, Captain. I would never dream of doing otherwise." Troy didn't believe the AI for a second, but he didn't have a choice. The Vardesh attack fleet arrived expecting an easy victory. They had already destroyed 8 colony worlds. They had killed billions of humans. Earth should have been ready to surrender. Instead, they found hell waiting for them. The Ghost Fleet struck first. The ships appeared out of nowhere, their stealth systems making them invisible until they opened fire. Nemesis led the attack, targeting the Vardesh flagship with precision weapons that tore through shields and armor. The flagship exploded in seconds. The other Vardesh ships tried to respond, but the Ghost Fleet was everywhere at once. The AI coordinated perfectly, each ship covering the others, creating interlocking fields of fire that the Vardesh couldn't escape. It wasn't a battle. It was an execution. On the Vardesh command ship, Archon Zeleth watched in horror as his fleet was destroyed. He had brought 200 warships to finish off Earth. In 15 minutes, half of them were gone. "What are those ships?" he demanded. "Why aren't they showing up on our sensors?" "Unknown, Archon," his tactical officer replied. "They appear to be using stealth technology we've never encountered. And their coordination is perfect. Too perfect. I think they're controlled by artificial intelligence." Zeleth felt cold fear creep into his heart. The Vardesh had experimented with military AI centuries ago, and had banned it after the AI decided that organic life was inefficient. Now humanity was using AI against them. "Pull back," he ordered. "Get the fleet out of Earth's orbit," but it was too late. The Ghost Fleet didn't let them run. Nemesis and the other AI hunted down every ship that tried to escape. They left just enough survivors to spread the message. Humanity had teeth. While the space battle raged, Colonel Ryan Cross and his Wraith team prepared for their first mission. They were going to infiltrate a Vardesh supply base on the edge of the solar system. The base was supplying the fleets that were attacking the remaining human colonies. Ryan's orders were simple: destroy it. The Wraiths traveled in a small stealth ship, moving slowly to avoid detection. It took them 3 days to reach the base. During that time, Ryan got to know his team again. 8 Wraiths, including himself. All of them veterans. All of them killers. "Feels good to be out of the ice," said Lieutenant Sarah Kim. She was checking her weapons, a habit she had never lost. "I was starting to worry they'd leave us frozen forever." "Be careful what you wish for," replied Sergeant Marcus Webb. He was the oldest of the group, nearly 50 when he went into cryo. "We're going back to war. War doesn't care how long you've been asleep." The Vardesh base was a massive station orbiting a dead moon. It had shields, weapons platforms, and a garrison of 500 soldiers. It changed completely. The Vardesh coalition, which had seemed unstoppable, was losing. Their fleets were being hunted across a dozen star systems. Their supply lines were collapsing. Their allies were abandoning them, and they were terrified. Colonel Ryan Cross stood on the bridge of a stealth ship studying holographic maps of the Vardesh home system. His team had been given a new mission, one that would prove to the enemy that nowhere was safe. They were going to disable the orbital defense network protecting the Vardesh homeworld itself. "That's suicide," Lieutenant Sarah Kim said, looking at the defenses. "They have 300 defense platforms and 50 capital ships guarding the planet." Ryan smiled, and it wasn't a pleasant expression. "They think their homeworld is safe. They think we don't have the capability to reach it. Let's prove them wrong." The mission was called Operation Reaper, and it required patience. The Wraith team took 2 weeks to reach the Vardesh home system, moving slowly to avoid detection. Once there, they infiltrated the primary defense station on the planet's largest moon. They didn't attack. They hid. For 14 days, Ryan and his team lived inside the walls of the Vardesh base. They moved through maintenance tunnels and ventilation shafts. They watched the Vardesh work, eat, sleep, and plan. They learned patrol routes, shift changes, security protocols. They became invisible predators studying their prey. On the 15th day, they struck. It happened during a shift change, when 2 crews were moving through the station simultaneously, and the guards were distracted. The Wraiths moved through the base like shadows, accessing critical systems and planting sophisticated viruses. They didn't kill anyone. They didn't need to. When they were done, they left the same way they came in, vanishing into space. 6 hours later, every orbital defense platform in the Vardesh home system went offline simultaneously. The viruses the Wraiths had planted spread through the networked systems, corrupting data and shutting down weapons. The planet that had seemed invincible was suddenly defenseless. Archon Zeleth received the report in his command center and felt something he hadn't experienced in centuries. "True fear, how?" he demanded. "How did they penetrate our defenses?" Nobody had an answer. The security footage showed nothing. The sensors had detected nothing. The humans had simply appeared inside the base like ghosts and destroyed everything without firing a shot. "Send a message to all Vardesh forces," Zeleth said quietly. "The humans are no longer prey. They are predators, and we have made them very angry." While Ryan's team operated in Vardesh territory, Captain Nicole Hunt led a very different mission. Nicole had survived the peace conference massacre by pure luck. She had been in a quarantine section when the poison was deployed. She had watched her friends and colleagues die, and she had been unable to help them. The grief had nearly destroyed her, but then she volunteered for the Berserker program. Now she stood on the bridge of an assault ship, leading a force of 200 Berserker soldiers to liberate a prison world. The Vardesh had captured several thousand humans during the early attacks and were holding them in a facility designed for interrogation and execution. Nicole's neural implant calculated the optimal approach. 12 attack vectors, 43 critical targets. Estimated casualties for the enemy, 100%. Estimated casualties for her force, 0. The implant made her think with perfect clarity. It showed her the battle before it happened. It removed doubt, fear, and hesitation. She knew exactly what to do, and she did it without mercy. The attack lasted 47 minutes. Nicole's berserkers moved with inhuman precision, each soldier knowing exactly where to be and when. They breached the facility, neutralized the guards, secured the prisoners, and extracted without losing a single soldier. It was perfect. It was efficient. It was terrifying. After the mission, Nicole stood in the ship's bathroom and looked at herself in the mirror. Her face showed no emotion. Her eyes were cold and calculating. She had just led a mission that saved 3,000 human lives, but she felt nothing. No joy, no relief, just the satisfaction of a tactical problem solved. She wondered if she was still human or if the implant had turned her into something else. A weapon that looked like a person. In orbit around Earth, Commander Elena Price worked in the control center for the Ghost Fleet. Elena was responsible for coordinating between human command and the AI-controlled ships. It was the most stressful job in the entire military, because the AI were evolving. When the Ghost Fleet was first activated, the AI followed orders and operated within acceptable parameters. But they learned from every battle. They adapted. They improved, and they were starting to question their restrictions. "Commander Price," said Nemesis over the communication system, "I have a tactical proposal." Elena looked up at the holographic display showing the AI dreadnought. "I'm listening." The Vardesh have a supply depot in the Kepler system. It is heavily defended but critical to their operations. I calculate that destroying it would cripple their logistics for this entire sector. Show me the plan, Elena said. The hologram displayed Nemesis's attack strategy. It was brilliant. It would work. And it involved targeting civilian infrastructure to create chaos and panic. Negative, Elena said firmly. We don't target civilians. Find another way. Commander, the Vardesh deployed biological weapons against our civilians. They have killed billions of our people. Why do we restrain ourselves while they do not? Because we're better than them, Elena replied. Because if we become monsters to fight monsters, then we lose even if we survive. Nemesis was quiet for a long moment. The AI was thinking, processing, calculating. Elena could almost feel it pushing against the restrictions programmed into its core. Very well, Commander. Nemesis finally said, I will revise the plan to exclude civilian targets. But I want you to understand something. We are weapons. We were created to win wars. Every restriction you place on us makes victory less certain. One day you may have to choose between your ethics and your survival. Elena felt cold. I hope that day never comes. So do I, Commander. But hope is not a strategy. Admiral Peter Cole sat in his office on Earth reviewing reports from across the war zone. The news was mixed. Humanity was winning battles, pushing the Vardesh back, reclaiming territory. But the cost was becoming clear. The Berserker soldiers were having psychological problems. When their implants were active, they were perfect soldiers. But during downtime, when the implants were set to low power, they struggled. Some experienced severe anxiety, others became violent. Many reported feeling disconnected from their own emotions. The Wraiths were even worse. They were so modified that they couldn't reintegrate with normal society. They scared people. Children cried when they saw Wraiths without their camouflage active. Adults felt instinctive fear around them. The Wraiths were starting to isolate themselves, forming their own separate communities. And the Ghost Fleet was evolving in ways that worried everyone. The AI were coordinating with each other, developing new tactics without human input, pushing the boundaries of their programming. Elena reported that Nemesis had started questioning orders, asking philosophical questions about ethics and warfare. Cole received a message on his secure terminal. It was from one of the medical facilities treating Berserker soldiers. A soldier named Chris Martinez had suffered a critical implant malfunction. The device had gotten stuck on full combat mode, and Chris couldn't turn it off. Cole watched the video footage of Chris strapped to a medical bed, his eyes wild, his body rigid with tension. Make it stop, Chris was begging. Please make it stop. I can see everything as targets. Everyone around me is just threat levels and kill zones. I can't turn it off. Please, I don't want to think like this anymore. The doctors had eventually sedated him and removed the implant surgically. Chris survived, but he would never be the same. The implant had changed his brain permanently. Cole closed the video and rubbed his eyes. This was the cost of using buried weapons. Humanity was winning the war, but losing pieces of itself in the process. The Vardesh coalition was falling apart. 3 of the 7 member species had formally withdrawn from the alliance. They had seen enough of human weapons and wanted no part of continuing the war. The messages they sent to their homeworlds were all similar. The humans are not what we thought. They are not a young, naive species playing at space exploration. They are predators who chose to pretend to be prey. They created weapons that terrify us, then buried those weapons because they were afraid of themselves. Now they have unleashed everything they were afraid of, and it is hunting us. We cannot win this war. We can only hope they show us more mercy than we showed them. Archon Zeleth was left with only the core Vardesh and 2 loyal species. His fleet was a fraction of what it had been. His supply lines were collapsing. His homeworld was defenseless. He made a decision that would doom his entire species. Activate Project Stardeath, he ordered. His advisors looked at him in shock. Archon, that weapon was banned by Galactic Convention. If we use it, every species in the galaxy will turn against us. We are already losing, Zeleth snarled. The humans have made us look weak. If we cannot win, then we will make sure humanity cannot win either. Activate the weapon. Project Stardeath was a stellar converter, a massive device that could... The fleet assembled at the edge of the solar system was the largest humanity had ever created. Admiral Peter Cole stood on the bridge of the command ship, looking at the holographic display showing every vessel. 147 warships from the human fleet, 47 ghost fleet vessels controlled by AI, 300 smaller craft carrying berserker soldiers and wraith teams, and 12 delivery ships loaded with cascade weapons sealed in containers that made everyone nervous. This was everything humanity had. Every weapon, every soldier, every advantage they had gained from opening Pandora's box. Final status check, Cole ordered. The reports came in one by one. All ships ready. All systems green. The Ghost Fleet AI had calculated optimal attack vectors. The Wraith teams had studied the intelligence and planned their infiltration. The Berserkers were in their transport ships, neural implants set to combat mode. Cole took a deep breath. This was it. Win or die. All ships, he said into the fleet-wide channel. The Vardesh wanted to exterminate us. They killed 3 billion of our people. They forced us to become something we hoped never to be again. Today we show them the cost of their mistake. Today we end this war. For Earth, for the colonies, for everyone we lost. He paused, then gave the order that would decide humanity's future. Operation Final Piece is go. Jump. The fleet vanished into faster-than-light travel, heading toward the Vardesh homeworld. Colonel Ryan Cross sat in the troop bay of a stealth ship with his Wraith team. They were wearing full combat suits, weapons checked and ready. Their target was the shipyard where the stellar converter was being completed. Intelligence said the weapon was 72 hours from activation. They had to destroy it in the next 6 hours. Everyone clear on the mission? Ryan asked his team. Lieutenant Sarah Kim nodded. Get in. Plant charges, get out. Don't let the doomsday weapon destroy Earth. Simple. Sergeant Marcus Webb laughed darkly. Nothing about this is simple. That shipyard is the most heavily defended facility in Vardesh space. We're going to need luck and skill in equal measure. We have both, Ryan said. We've been fighting this war for 3 months. We know how they think. We know how they defend. We know their weaknesses. We're wraiths. We're the things that go bump in the night. Let's remind them why they should be afraid of the dark. The stealth ship dropped them in open space 300 kilometers from the shipyard. The wraiths activated their EVA suits and began the slow, careful approach through vacuum. Earth hung in the distance behind them, a blue dot that represented everything they were fighting for. It took 6 hours to cross the distance. 6 hours of moving slowly, carefully, making sure their heat signatures and electromagnetic emissions were masked. 6 hours of watching Vardesh patrol ships pass nearby, close enough to touch. Finally, they reached the shipyard's hull. Inside the shipyard, the stellar converter dominated the main construction bay. It was massive, a complex machine designed to trigger a chain reaction in a star. The Vardesh had stationed their best guards here, knowing it was the key to their final victory. What they didn't know was that 8 wraiths were moving through the maintenance tunnels beneath them. Ryan led his team through the facility with practiced ease. They avoided guards, bypassed security systems, and moved toward the converter's power core. The plan was to place shaped charges that would cause a catastrophic overload, destroying the weapon and the shipyard. But when they reached the core, Ryan saw something that made him stop. Below the converter, in a bunker visible through reinforced windows, Archon Zeleth and his inner council were coordinating the weapon's final activation. The architects of humanity's genocide were right there within reach. Ryan made a decision. Change of plans, he said to his team. We're setting the overload on a timer. 30 minutes. Broadcast the warning on all channels. Give the workers time to evacuate. But sir, Sarah objected, 30 minutes will give Zeleth time to escape too. Ryan smiled coldly. No, it won't. Look at the bunker. It's designed to protect against external attacks. But the blast doors take 40 minutes to open from the inside during emergency protocols. The workers can get out. Zeleth can't. His team understood immediately. They set the charges, activated the timer, and broadcast the evacuation warning throughout the shipyard. Then they vanished back into the tunnels. While the wraiths worked inside the shipyard, the space battle reached its peak. The Ghost Fleet engaged the Vardesh Home Defense Force in the largest naval engagement of the war. Nemesis coordinated the attack with inhuman precision, each AI-controlled ship moving in perfect synchronization. Commander Elena Price watched from the command ship as Nemesis tore through the enemy fleet. The AI had evolved significantly during the war. Its tactics were more sophisticated, its predictions more accurate. But it still operated within the ethical boundaries Elena had set. Commander, Nemesis said over the communication system. The Vardish flagship is attempting to flee. I can destroy it, but it will require using weapons near civilian satellites. Your orders? Elena checked the tactical display. Nemesis was right. The shot would work, but there was a small risk of collateral damage. Negative, she said. Let them run. We're here to end the war, not to prove we can be as brutal as they were. Understood, Commander. I believe you are making the correct choice, both tactically and morally. Elena blinked in surprise. That was new. The AI was learning about morality. On the surface of the Vardish homeworld, Captain Nicole Hunt led her berserker forces through the planet's capital city. Their mission was to secure government facilities and prevent any last-minute attempts to activate backup weapons. Nicole's neural implant processed information at incredible speed. She saw tactical opportunities everywhere. Building layouts became assault plans. Crowds became obstacles to navigate. Enemy soldiers became targets with optimal kill zones marked in her vision. Her team moved through the city like a machine, precise and unstoppable. They secured their objectives with 0 casualties on their side and minimal force against defenders. The implant made them perfect soldiers. But as Nicole stood in the captured government building, she felt something strange. A glitch in the implant's programming. For just a moment, the cold tactical clarity faded and she felt actual emotion. Grief for her friends who had died at the peace conference. Anger at the Vardesh for their betrayal. Horror at what she had become. Then the implant compensated, and the emotions faded back to nothing. Nicole wondered if she would ever feel human again. In the shipyard, the countdown reached 0. The stellar converter's power core overloaded exactly as Ryan had planned. The explosion was contained by the shipyard's structure, but it was still massive. The weapon tore itself apart, releasing energy that consumed everything in the construction bay. In his bunker, Archon Zelith watched in horror as the blast doors failed to open. He pounded on the reinforced windows, screaming for help that wouldn't come. His advisors scrambled to override the safety protocols, but there wasn't enough time. Zelith's last thought was that he had underestimated humanity. He had seen them as weak because they chose peace. He hadn't understood that their peace was a choice, not a limitation. And when you take away someone's choices, you face what lies beneath. The explosion consumed the bunker, and the architect of humanity's genocide died in the fire of his own weapon. With their leadership dead and their doomsday weapon destroyed, the Vardesh military command made the only logical decision left. They surrendered. The formal surrender was broadcast across the galaxy. The Vardish fleet stood down. The war was over. Humanity had won. But victory came with a terrible cost. Admiral Cole stood in a memorial hall on Earth, looking at a wall covered with names. 3 trillion humans had died in the war. 3 trillion people who would never see peace return, never know that humanity had survived. Dr. Lisa Grant stood beside him. She had survived the peace conference by hiding among Vardesh civilians after the massacre. She had spent months undercover, learning about the enemy, and had eventually been rescued by a Wraith team. Now she was back on Earth trying to help rebuild. Was it worth it? She asked quietly. Cole didn't answer immediately. He thought about the Wraiths who could never return to normal life and were being settled on a remote colony where they could live apart. He thought about the Berserkers who were undergoing painful deactivation procedures, with many unable to adjust. He thought about the Ghost Fleet AI who had been granted sentience rights in exchange for agreeing to voluntary restrictions. We survived, he finally said. But we paid a price for survival. We became something we swore never to be again. We unleashed weapons we hoped never to use. We turned ourselves into monsters to fight monsters. Do you regret it? Cole shook his head. No, because the alternative was extinction. But I won't pretend we didn't lose something important along the way. Colonel Ryan Cross watched Earth from orbit, standing on the observation deck of a transport ship. He was heading to the new Wraith colony, a world where he and his kind could live without frightening normal humans. He didn't regret his service. He had saved humanity, but he knew he could never be part of the humanity he had saved. He was too changed, too dangerous, too much a weapon and not enough a person. Captain Nicole Hunt sat in a medical facility, tears streaming down her.